And Brandon, let's move on into our next team. It will be the Arizona State Sun Devils. ASU will be the next one on the docket. And with this one, we're going to it's funny, both Arizona teams in this conference, we're starting them off the same way. And we're looking at the defensive side of the ball, which is, if you're not new to the Primetime Podcast, you're like, whoa, guys, wait a second. You guys usually start with offense. Are you guys feeling okay? You've started two teams off with the defensive side now, but this is a team kind of like their brothers from the same state as them. They have some changes coming to the defensive side. And for me, the big change is that they're bringing in a veteran coordinator in Phil Bennett to kind of take over this defense that finished last nationally in passing yards allowed for each of the past two seasons. I'll just ask you this. Can Bennett coming over from Baylor, he did the same thing for Baylor when he was there with Art Briles, can he come in and make this defense anything special? Because I look at that and I go, it's a Big 12. Like, I look at the stereotypical, like, really, we're bringing in a Big 12 coordinator to work on the defense? Because we all know in the Big 12 they don't play defense. There's just all air raid offenses out there. So do you have any confidence in Bennett being able to turn this team around and kind of make it so they're not last nationally in the passing yards?
So Bennett is known for turning around some bad defenses, and he certainly has his work cut out for him here because they are a bad defense. They were, again, like you said, they were the worst pass defense in all of college football, and they found themselves in a lot of them, like shootout after shootout after shootout, that the defenses just could not hang on, and really were not helpful at all in holding down any other teams in their losses. USC 41 points they gave up there, Colorado 40, Washington State 37, Oregon 54, Utah 49, Washington 44, and Arizona 56. And that's just not going to cut it. I mean, that's just not acceptable. I mean, that's terrible. They gave up 33 touchdown passes. They pick off only 9 passes on the season. They allowed almost 14 yards per catch. 14 yards per catch. That's just no good. I mean, that's just no good. So they need to absolutely go back to the drawing board and see what they need to do to be able to get better this year. And I think that part of it's going to start with some pass rush to get some pressure on the quarterback. But I think at the same time, a lot of it's going to have to do with the secondary and what they're going to be able to do against opposing receivers and pass breakups and getting a couple more interceptions and things like that. The pass rush and the secondary, to me, are going to be the most important for this team to be successful.
It's funny that you say, well, hey, you know what, the secondary is going to be important, because when I look at their roster, the weakest part of the defense is the secondary. You have one returning starter in Marcus Ball, and that's because you have other starters in safety. Armand Perry retired this offseason. You have your top cornerback in Kareem Orr. Oh, wait, he's not with the team. He's now in Chattanooga doing the Chattanooga choo-choo now. You've got one guy returning, and that is Ball. And the thing that also doesn't help Bennett is usually you see a lot of coaches that are trying to build programs. I saw it a lot with Tim Beckman when he was with my Illinois Fighting Illini, was you see coaches go out and try to get infusions of JUCO transfers, guys from junior college or D1 transfers, to kind of solidify some of your big positions. The secondary has none of these for ASU, and that's going to go a long way to kind of making this a tough kind of a rebuild year one for Phil Bennett, because he's not going to have those older guys to kind of rely on. He's going to have new guys stepping up into new roles. And I think this team is going to be, it starts at the line and moves back, where the line is good. The linebackers are decent, but it's a step back. And then the secondary is just awful this year. I don't see any way that this team overall flips the script. And you know how I said, oh, they were last nationally in passing yards? I don't see them flipping the script year one. This year for ASU on defense needs to be, hey, if we can get a little bit better, attack some of these things in recruiting so that next year maybe they do bring in some JUCO guys. Maybe they do bring in a D1 transfer to kind of focus on this secondary that may need it this year, because that's the one section of the defense I look at and I go, I'm not very excited for you guys in 2017.
I think that it helps that they've got their top 2 tacklers back this year. I think it helps that they've got some veterans up at the line.
Helps with your overall leadership.
Which is a great thing, and I think that they'll be better up front. But it's certainly in the secondary, they're going to be going with a lot of prospects. They're going to be going with a lot of guys who are going to be getting their shot. We could very well see a rotation back there in the secondary of who's good, who's not so good. We try this guy out, we try that guy out. It's going to be a lot of trial and error, I think, in the secondary, which really won't bode too well for Arizona State. But honestly, I think if Arizona State's able to win 8 games this season, they'd be pretty happy. 7 to 8 games for them, they would be ecstatic. They won 5 last year, 5-7, 2-7 in the conference, and this defense, so they need to get better. And they really do. To be competitive, they need to get better quick. But I just don't see that happening necessarily this year. I think up front they'll be better. I think up front they'll bring more pressure. But in the secondary, there's just not enough there of the guys that they currently have. Now, maybe they will get lucky. And the guys that they put in there,
just
trying to put in some puzzle pieces, they just absolutely.
They really
start to make an impact right away. But if they don't do that, then it's going to be a tough learning year for them.
And another thing that I look at, and I mean, this is going over to the offense now, I have a quote here from Todd Graham at ASU, because the last 2 seasons they've seen changes in their scheme offensively. And I mean, coming into this year, Todd Graham has said, and I quote, "We're a spread, no huddle, 11 personnel, run, play action, pass team," end quote. And I look at that and I go, okay, that may be true on a foundation level, but this will be yet another year where you go through a transition, because you have your offensive coordinator in Chip Lindsey. He's now gone. He went from Tempe, Arizona. He is now in Auburn to go be with Gus Malzahn and the Auburn Tigers in the SEC. You bring in the wide receivers coach from Alabama and Billy Napier, and I say where he came from because quarterback-wise, there's a little bit of a choice that ASU has to go through this year. Notice how a lot of these previews, when we come to the offense, a lot of these teams, whether it's because people are leaving, whether it's because you know what we had last year, just I don't know if we can go through that again. We've been talking a lot about quarterback changes and guys that, do I pick this guy, do I pick that guy? And Arizona State is no stranger to that this offseason. They have a choice between this, Brandon. They can either go with their returning starter in Manny Wilkins, or they can go with the Alabama transfer in Blake Barnett. And the thing that I'm trying to look through right now to kind of weed through the grass is with the coach coming in from Alabama, Napier, could this be a good thing for Barnett to where, yeah, I know Manny Wilkins was there last year, but hey, you know what? This is a coach I know. I know the things that he's going to want to do, because he's going to try to bring over a little bit some of the things that Nick Saban had done at Alabama. Basically, I'm going to ask you this. If you are Todd Graham, you are Billy Napier, who are you picking? Are you going with the returning starter in Manny Wilkins? Are you going with the Alabama transfer in Blake Barnett?
Well, I'll be honest with you. Right now, I'm going with Manny Wilkins. He's the one that you've seen produce anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, I mean, why would you go with somebody, Blake Barnett, who is, you have a small sample size, 200 and some yards, couple touchdowns. That's it. I mean, it's not like he's coming from Alabama as this guy who came over. He was the starter there, and now he's coming over here. you're not getting a situation like that.
You're not getting Jalen Hurts, is what you're saying.
No,
you're not getting the guy who
you're not getting
was
the starter.
there and then
you're
he's coming back.
You're not getting the starter. I think that you go with Manny Wilkins, who wasn't great. He only threw 12 touchdowns, 10 games, 12 touchdowns, 9
interceptions.
Picks. So that's got to get better, but that's why I think I would go Manny Wilkins if we had to go right now, but they're not going right now. I mean, I think they're going to wait deep into August to figure out who this guy's who the quarterback's going to end up being, who the starter's going to end up being. It may be Barnett, but I think that if you want to go with someone who is a bit of a track record, you go with Wilkins, and if he doesn't improve or you don't like what you're seeing from him, then you have to go over to Blake Barnett. But I don't see why there's any reason to not go with Wilkins to start off the season. Unless, of course, you're seeing a lot more from Barnett in the next couple of weeks. But if you don't, I say you go with Wilkins.
And I'm reading something right now off of Arizona Central, azcentral.com. And they have kind of a little bit of, first a quote from Billy Napier where he said, and I quote, "It's going to be a heck of a battle, man." And they kind of put in there, they're like, reading between the lines, basically, Wilkins has the right to be the starter. He hasn't done anything to say, you know what, you are not the starter coming into next year. However, on the flip side, Barnett has every reason in the playbook, every reason in the world to have the chance to take the job from Wilkins. It's not a solidified thing. And the thing that they put in that's important, and I'm going to read this quote for you, is it says, "In the past, Graham has placed a significant emphasis on leadership. He wants a quarterback who will evaluate the entire unit, not so much the quarterback who can handle defenders, Wilkins, or rifle a pass through a wall, Barnett. Both quarterbacks seem to have this quality locked in," end quote. And that's kind of where I was going to go with. Not exactly the leadership, but kind of the same model is the guy who's going to win this job, it will not be anything about the stats on the field. Like I want to say you mentioned with the Arizona preview, because we didn't talk about this with UCLA because they have their quarterback all locked up already. You can kind of take last year's stats to me, throw it out the window. Because you have a new coordinator coming in, it's which quarterback is A, going to fit in this system, and B, that right fit, where it feels right having him out there. And then number two, what they've just said in this article, where which one is going to lead your team effectively. Because, and I say throw the stats out, because let's be honest, Manny Wilkins' stats, yes, he's had more proven track record than Barnett, but you read off those stats, Brandon, and it's nothing that overly impresses me as an outsider to Arizona. It doesn't impress me that you have 12 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. So I look at it as, yes, they could go deep into August, but to me, it's whichever one out there you feel right and you go, you know what? I feel confident that we can win some football games with this guy in this system based off of what I've seen in practice.
I mean, yeah. I completely agree. It's basically the same thing that I said. It's neither one of them is, a guy that just blows you away where you're like, wow, he's got to be out there starting. But I don't think that there'd be any reason not to give it to Manny Wilkins to start just because he's been the guy who's been there. Not that he has overly impressive stats, just that you know what you're going to get from him. You don't necessarily know what you're going to get from Barnett, but maybe that's why you throw him out there. But,
So are you saying maybe throw both out there in that New Mexico State game?
No, I'm not saying that.
Throw one out and then kind of see how it is, and the next game change it up if you don't like it? Or are you saying pick one and then boom, that's your guy for the whole year?
No, I didn't. None of that. You're not listening. So I said that I would go with Manny Wilkins because he is the one who's been there. He's got the track record. If you put him out there and you're not seeing exactly what you want to see, you think you can have a little bit more from Barnett, then you put him out there. And I'm not saying even in the same game, say maybe a couple of weeks in, stuff like that. But that's where I'm at on a situation like that. But again, you are in a position where you don't have a guy who is overly impressive. You don't have a guy who comes in with just these awesome stats and this great track record that comes with him. You don't have that. So it may just not necessarily matter what has been done in the past, but more what they see in their practices leading up to the season. That's what's going to be, I think, probably the deciding factor for them based on what you had just mentioned there in your quote and everything like that you read. That's what it sounds like to me.
I'll ask you this, kind of the last thing to kind of put a big kibosh on this one. The one thing we haven't looked at for Arizona State, the schedule. Let's say Manny Wilkins is your starter right now because he's the guy that they're putting in the number one spot at the moment. What do you think is the best case scenario for Arizona? What's the worst case? What's kind of a, you know what, if they do this win-wise, it's a successful season?
7-8 wins. 7-8 wins would be very successful for them. I think they need to get back to, a running attack and a rushing attack that last year saw a lot of touchdowns be put on the board, but 7 of those touchdowns came by one guy in the game against Texas Tech. But I think that if they can get back to a solid running game, a quarterback that, I'm not even going to say a quarterback that's in limbo, but a quarterback that maybe isn't putting out the stats that you want to see right away, you are able to help carry that team. And if they're able to do that, I think seven wins could be attainable.
I look at the schedule, and I kind of have a hard time seeing 7 wins on the schedule. I could see the same thing as last year. I could see 3-0 to start the season because their non-conference isn't super tough. Really depends on what kind of a team we see from Texas Tech this year. I know that one is on the road this year. But when I look at the Pac-12, the only teams they beat last year were Cal and UCLA. You want to know the big differences with those two teams to this year? The first one's obvious looking at the schedule. Cal's not there. You don't get to play Cal this year. The other thing, Josh Rosen could be healthy. There's both your wins. You got to find wins in different places. Oregon, like we've said, question mark. Stanford, to me, I think that would be a loss for them and a win for Stanford, but Stanford's another team where it's like, I don't know what to take of them completely coming in to this year. Maybe they win Oregon State and Arizona. I look at this conference though, and it's hard for me to see 4 wins on this because really that's what you would need for a 7-win season is 4 wins if you get 3 in the non-conference. I don't see that. I don't even see 3, let's say, just to get to a bowl game. So I wonder what it would feel like for Arizona if they basically do the same thing. If they win their non-conference 3-0, they go through, because I'm looking at it right now, if I had to give kind of a easy prediction of you win the first 3, you lose from Oregon to UCLA, you win the last 2. So it's almost the same as last year where, yeah, you had some losses in between your 2 wins, but you still had that streak of just losing when it came to conference games. I think that doesn't necessarily change this year. And the best I see this team going is yet again 5-7. The worst I see this team going is probably 2-3 wins. So from 2 to 3 to 5 is kind of the win total that I'm looking for in this team, which even if they got 5-7, like you said, that would not be a successful season for the Sun Devils.
No, I think that, again, they should win their first 3 games. Oregon, you could win that game. Colorado, I don't think is going to be as good as they were last season. There's a potential there. And then Oregon State and Arizona, I would put those as wins for Arizona State. So you could get to 7. You could get to 7. 8 would be a real stretch. If you got to 8, that'd be like, whoa, wow, we didn't expect that, but that's nice.
Well, if they got to 8, it would be like, whoa, where did this team come from with the secondary that we talked about? But we're going to dish the conversation off to you guys. Let us know, what do you guys think? The defensive side, Arizona State fans, are you really worried about your secondary? Who would you pick to be your quarterback? Are you going with the Alabama transfer or the returning starter coming into this year? And really, what are you expecting from this year? Win total, what do you want to see from this year? What would equal a successful season for you? Let us know down below in the comment section.